We're now going to take a look at the methods and constants that help us build this app's menu. So during the test drive, I showed you that if the user hits the menu button on the device, or in this case the menu button in the AVD, a menu appears at the bottom of the window in which the user can select the number of choices or select the regions. Now you can see that I have a current quiz underway here that I'm on question 6 out of 10 for, and that there's 3 options displayed. If I go to my menu and select number of choices, I'm presented with a dialog in which I can select 3, 6, or 9. Only one of them can be selected at a given time. So this is a single selection type of dialog that we're displaying here. And let's say I wanted 6 choices for each flag. I hit 6. Then it restarts the quiz. You can see it went back to question 1, and now for the flag that's displayed, I have 6 different options that I can choose from. Now, when I did my test drive, I also had only the North American region selected. I went before the test drive and unchecked all the other items in this list. This is what we call a multi-choice or a multi-select list. And in this case, each one is provided with a checkbox. So if I wanted North America and Africa, I can go ahead and check Africa. Now both are selected, and what that means, in this case now I also selected Asia, what that means is that flags will be selected from all of those regions. So let's say we only wanted flags from Asia. In that case, we can uncheck these other regions. When I hit the reset quiz button, it starts the quiz over, only using flags from Asian countries on the Asian continent. So the way that we implement that is via the onCreateOptionsMenu, which displays the menu items, and onOptionsItemSelected, which is going to respond when an item is selected from a menu. Now, in order to use menus, you first need to have a set of unique IDs to identify the different menu items. So the first thing we did here at lines 339 and 340 is define two final static integers, choices menu ID and regions menu ID. Menu.first is a constant in the menu class that just represents the first menu item, and so we decided that the choices menu ID would be menu.first, and for all the other ones, to make them unique, you can just add 1 to the previous one that you defined. So in this case, menu.first plus 1 gives me a unique value for the regions menu ID. Now, when the user touches the menu button on the device, whether it's a soft menu button in Android 3 and higher or an actual menu button on a device like a phone, the onCreateOptionsMenu method of the activity gets called, and we're overriding that method. So we're calling the superclass version first. Then at lines 349 and 350, we start adding menu items. Now, the menu items that we're adding, each add method call takes 4 arguments. The first argument in each case is the group that the menu item belongs to. Now, in our case, we said menu.none for both of these because we don't have groups of menu items. Basically, the group ID allows you to manage shared state amongst different menu items. So, for example, if you have a group of menu items that would all be disabled at once, you can put them all in the same group ID and then disable the group all at once. The second value in each case is the unique ID for the menu item. The third value determines the order in which these items are displayed. In our case, we said menu.none because it's not actually important to this app if the choices or regions menu item is displayed first in the menu. And then finally, the last argument in each case is the actual string that we want to display in the menu. And again, it's a good practice to make these string resources so that if you want to localize your app for different languages, you can have different sets of strings for each language, and Android is capable, if you name those files correctly, of picking the appropriate set of strings based on the user's locale. So this is our creation of the menu. And then we have the onOptionsItemSelected method, which we're also overriding. That's inherited from our activity superclass. And basically, this method receives the menu item that got selected. So we can get from that menu item its item ID, and then we use that in a switch statement here to determine if the user selected the choices menu item or the regions menu item, and then we handle that accordingly. So if the user wants to change the number of choices, the first thing we do is we have our case for the choices menu ID. If that's the menu item the user selected, then we get the list of possible choices, which is a string array resource that we defined in the strings.xml file. So if I go back to strings.xml here for a moment, you can see the string array guesses list with the values 3, 6, and 9. And if I go back here, you can see that I am getting the guesses list array using a resources object to get the string array, and that string array is called possible choices. Then we start building our alert dialog. Now in this case, the alert dialog does have a title, which is the string choices that's defined in the strings.xml file. Then we have a call to the dialog builder's set items method, and the set items method receives as its first argument an array that represents the items to display. In this case, we give it the resource ID, so there's actually overloaded versions of this method, and it picks off those values. And then at lines 375 through 384, we define the anonymous inner class that listens for touches on those individual items. Now, whichever item is touched, the onClick event handler method will get called. The item number represents which of the items was touched, and we use that in here to determine the number of guess rows, and then we call reset quiz to start up a new quiz with the appropriate number of rows. And you can see what we're doing here is we're taking the value of possible choices subitem, which is 3, 6, or 9, converting that to a string. Then we're parsing that as an integer, and then finally dividing that by 3. So if the choice is 3, there will be 1 guess row. If the choice is 6, there will be 2 guess rows. And if the choice is 9, there will be 3 guess rows. And finally, we go ahead and display our dialog. And again, you don't need to create the dialog first from the dialog builder. We could have simply replaced these two highlighted lines with choicesbuilder.show to get the same result. And returning true gets us out of the onOptionsItemSelected method, indicating that we've handled the event. Now, in the case where we want to select from the different regions, we go to the second case in our switch here, and you can see here that we get the array of region names, and we do this by converting the regions map's key set to an array of strings, and the argument to array is an array of strings of the appropriate size. The values that we're converting into an array will then be placed into that new string array, which will then be returned and assigned to region names. Then at line 398, we get our array of booleans representing which regions are currently enabled. And at line 399 and 400, we have a loop that walks through the regions enabled array, and for each element gets the corresponding boolean value out of the regions map, so that we can indicate which of the elements that we're about to display should have a check in its checkbox. Next, we start building our dialog. Again, we use an alert dialog.builder. We set its title to the string regions from the strings.xml file. We get the display names for those regions. First, we create an array of strings representing those display names. Then we go ahead and get the display names and put them into the array. And in this case, we use the alert dialog builder's set multi-choice items method. Now this method takes 3 arguments: the names of the items that should be displayed, an array of booleans representing the item's state, whether they should be checked true or unchecked false, and an event listener that says what to do when the user makes a selection. So in our case, every time the user touches one of those checkboxes, it's toggling the state. We want to know that, and we use the onClick method here to help us change the state in the regions map. So whatever the value is of is checked, we go to the regions map, we call put for one of the regions, whichever one the user just selected. That is represented by the integer called which, and it's an index into the array that we're using that represents the names. And then finally, the value of is checked says if that checkbox is currently checked true or unchecked false. So we put the new value into the regions map, and of course once the user touches the positive button, which is defined in this highlighted region, this is the reset quiz button, our positive button, that's going to call reset quiz. Reset quiz will use the values that are currently in regions map to determine which regions to select flags from and then start a new quiz for us. And finally, after building the dialog, we go down to the bottom here and display that dialog on the screen. If neither of the options that were selected match the items in the switch, we would just return the result of super.on on options items selected, and in this case that would simply wind up causing the menu to be hidden on the screen.